Alright, this is your waistband video. If I start spouting nonsense and just screaming incoherently into the void, join me. It's friendly here. Alright, so I'm just going to start with the first step of the waistband. This is what was supposed to be happening today in fittings, right? This is Tuesday morning, so yesterday in fittings, whatever the heck day it is. And I'm just going to go over this step by step. So we did this in demo. There is already a video of it at the end of our sort of assembly demonstration video, which you can go ahead and check out and go all the way through if you're unsure what was due on Tuesday. In this particular case, we're just going to go over it again just to make sure. So this was the responsibility of the original maker, the garment owner, as we are going to call it, all right? I'm just going to show you what it should look like. Your waistband, corner, pick a side seam. Doesn't matter which side you start on. Either way is fine. Pick a side seam, not the center seam, the side seam, unless you're dividing by color. This is going to be more annoying to work with. So if this was purple and this was teal, we might do it that way, just for the color reasons. But otherwise, pick a side seam. Once we've lined that up, and I've already started to pin these a little bit, this is what you want to see. You're going to pin all the way along. Once you get to that center seam, if you're doing pants, though you won't have that if you're doing a skirt, you want to pin it open. You want to pin this open and make sure you're stitching it openly too. Do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. And you're going to keep going all the way around. Same thing at the other side. You're going to pin him open. So all you're doing is attaching a straight strip by the seam all the way around the waistline. We did this in class. We're just going over it. So this is what you want to see, basically. And then we're stitching along here. All right? We're going to go through that step as well. I'm going to pin this out. Just start with the corner. Keep going straight until you circle all the way back around to this side. They should meet here. Meet all the way back here. It's one big circle. A quick note that if you are someone who cut your waistband in two for the sake of, that's how much fabric you had left or whatever other reason, make sure that you sewed your two pieces together in your waistband. It's going to be way easier if you sewed it together to actually attach the waistband. Sew it together first. So all I'm going to do is do a seam. Just one seam. Like so. Like so. Now there's a seam in there. Good news. I did that without pins, and I did that without really looking at it. Either 6 a.m. is just my best time, or I've been doing this for too many years, you guys. What I will tell you right now, look at my face. Look at me. If you're obsessing about matching up your lines, you should be. That's awesome. Matching up your lines and getting your stitch line right on both sides, awesome. You should be. That's exactly right. Pro tip. The lines I'm going to be looking at for grading are the lines that we've already focused on. They're going to be your side seam, your out seam, your inseam on the pants, your crotch seam, or your side seams on your skirt. Skirts, you got fewer seams. You got like half the number of seams, less than half the number of seams. Your seams, your side seams should be perfect. Those are the seams that I'm going to be looking at for grading purposes. So if you are a rubric watcher, know that right now. Those are the seams that I'm going to be checking for absolutely perfect matchup, because other things are going to be more likely to shift during fittings, and to shift a little bit as we continue to fit and that kind of thing. They're more likely to be finagled a little bit. Your side seams, inseam, outseam, crotch seam should be pristine. If you got to fudge something, don't fudge those. That's the grade point, okay? Got to fudge something else. Ooh, my face. So in the absolute dream world, as we can see, we had this waistband that was cut into two pieces. This seam, the waistband seam, for those two pieces falling here, this is the seam on the pants. We would love if those two things matched up, like that'd be super nifty. But because the butt of the pants was wider deliberately in most of the pattern making, except for a couple of you who didn't do it that way, that makes sense, that the waistband was cut in half the measurement of the total that we need, just cut in half. So it makes sense that it would be off from this seam. Just take a note that in the dream world where we're all fully blooded professionals, this would match up super perfectly to this, and that would be part of how the garment was designed and constructed, all right? So that's kind of our lesson in what it would look like if we were at a slightly more advanced place in our journey, and what the good version, like the highest quality version of that would look like. Does that make sense so far? And then I'm just going to keep pinning that all the way around. We're almost there. Pro tip, when you get to these seams, I'm putting, one really easy way to make sure that it's happening is to put one pin on each side. Got two pins close together. It's possible I'll break a needle. That could happen. I'll do the same thing probably over here. But it's one good way for a beginner to make sure that these are staying nice and open, which is what we want to see, all right? And I'm going to show you something that happened. So I just pinned all the way around, and I've got some more purple. Then I do waistband. Oh no, tragedy has struck. So this is that process where we're going to call easing. We talked about easing a couple of times, and I've talked to a lot of you about it individually. Fabric munges. Fabric likes to kind of do something just sideways from what you wanted it to do. So I'm going to go back, take out a few pins so that I've got some more open space. And what I'm going to do is basically kind of stretch this out. And we practiced this on the side seams as well, so you can go ahead and check out the earlier assembly video on easing, which we also got about to the waistband point on there, so you may find other useful waistband tips there. And I'm going to kind of find a center point so that that excess is broken up across a wider area, and I can kind of munge it into place. So I found my center point between here and where I pinned my other pin. And now if I kind of spend some time stretching it out and munging it, I'm going to be able to get it to lie flat. If you really can't get it to lie flat, it probably means you need a wider area, so I take more pins out this way and just keep, I do a lot of this gesture, this kind of finger press gesture, which is something that is that's an actual tailoring word, finger pressing. So I've got still a little bit more here than I want, but I think I can get them to even out with a little bit of pressure as I sew. So instead of having one big lump over here like I started with, we're just kind of distributing that little bit of unevenness that comes from the nature of the fabric itself, and this has been through the dye vat and this hasn't, and this is stretched a little bit more and this hasn't because it's been through, the dye and the wash and the dry cycle and da-da-da-da-da. Expect your fabrics to not, in their nature, line up as perfectly as you want. You are the boss of the fabric at this moment. You rule the fabric does not rule you. So visual overview, this, when it's pinned, is what we want to see. Legs down here, that's your hem down there. Waistband up here, pinned all the way around. This is loose up here. This is pinned to the actual waistband of the pants pieces that you've already sewn together. For everyone in the back, this is what was due on Tuesday. This is what we were looking for the phase for you to be at. This stitched down on the stitching line for fittings. That is a fitting ready garment. If this was stitched on with no hems and no pockets, that would be a perfectly fitting ready garment. It doesn't have to be pressed for the purposes of this class, so in a professional situation it would be. That would be a fitting ready garment. That was what we were expecting to see and what we talked about for this Tuesday. And now, with the technique that we've all been waiting for, which is the same technique that we have been using, that I have faith that you will master over the course of this assignment. Actually, a lot of you already have. A lot of you are doing amazing at this. We're going to just stitch down this line all the way around the whole thing. I'm going to go over settings one more time. You want this to be a 3. You want this to be between 2.5 and 3.5. Nothing else matters. That's all you need. If in doubt and your machine is set to weird settings, go to the on and off switch on the side, turn it off, turn it on, and it'll come right back up like this. It will come back up like this every time. I'm going to turn this up just for the sake of making it easier to take back out. Okay, so my feet is down. And then I'm going to go back. We're going to anchor stitch. Yes, we need an anchor stitch. Recommend an anchor stitch. And I'm going to go forward, and that's the whole deal. How fast can I go without looking actually at anything but the camera? This is going to end in disaster. Like most of my life does. And that's all we're doing. We're just going along. Remember, you can control your speed here. First carat is the slowest speed. It'll stop you from going any faster. It'll go very slowly and let you get acclimated to the process. Once you feel confident, go up to 2, up to 3. Usually I keep it at 3. I'm going to finish off this seam and then check back in. I sewed the whole thing all the way to the end, and my bobbin ran out right there. I have to be on a shuttle to SeaTac in 2 hours. Well, we're up. Your bobbin comes from here. Winding a bobbin. Let's go through it step by step. Take him up here. Put him here. Put your thread here on the same spool that we usually do for everything else. Put the cap on. I didn't want to unthread the whole thing just because I didn't want to. Take the end of your thread. There he is. camera, focus. And you're going to, you can do this before or after you settle it here. Find the little hole, you see him? Slip that through, pull it, and then you can do this before or after you actually put the thread on the bobbin. Loop around here. Oh boy. My caffeine is no longer coming to my aid. Gondor! Gondor! So he wants to get under there. Can we see that? Wants to get under there. Not like on top or just around. He wants to get into this little tension knot. And then overall, I'm going to pull this a little bit tighter. So he's a little bit tense. Not too tense. You know, low levels of tension. This is wrapping weird. If you ever have weird tension that you don't want, oftentimes spinning your thread around to the other side is the way to do it. Okay. You want to hear that little ping. Ping. He wants to be pointed over to all the way to here. Hold on to your tail. Hold on to your tail. Just press the pedal. That's it. That's all of it. Okay. Now that we've got a little bit wound up, I'm going to trim off all my excess thread because I don't need him anymore in my life. Can even pull him off. And now we just sit here until the end of time while it bobbins. While it do what bobbin do. I know, this is my dream too. And as you'll see, he'll get bigger and bigger until eventually he bumps the shield over here. This boy. And that will tell it that it's full enough for what this machine is comfortable carrying. Some machines are more picky than others. So it's nice that on this one we have a guide. I would definitely watch this as an ASMR video, but just this part. See how it automatically stopped? I didn't stop. It did that because it's telling me this boy has blocked it from going further. This boy is telling me now it's full. Good job. We did it. Now I'm going to snip. Take my bobbin off. Take my thread color that's not the thread color that I'm using, but I'm using it for my bottom thread off. Put my real thread back on. Cap it again. Everything's the same as it was. Take my bobbin. Just set it in there. He's a nice, friendly, user-friendly bobbin. You want your thread pointing towards the outside, not towards the butt of the machine, the bulk of the machine, away. And then, from there, you want to put him around that little dude, and there's an arrow here because these machines like to help us, to there, okay? If you ever need to wind the bobbin. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to send our needle down. See how it's going to loop around. I'm going to catch this tail just to make sure. And now it's just pulled up my bottom thread. So now I have... Don't fight with me, madam. Can you see him? I don't know if you can see him. There we go. There we go. Now I have two threads coming from where they're supposed to come from. Clicking back into place. This is what we want to see, right? This is the format of a machine that is prepared to stitch. Two threads, one from the bottom, one from the top, both sitting underneath the foot. Now I'm going to go back to where my bobbin ran out. And I'm just going to finish this up. And that, my friends, that is what was due Tuesday, coming up on 24 hours ago. A fitting ready garment with the first step of the waistband done. Let's just take a second to imagine, and again, I'm going to make an entire video that's just about grade transparency, because I think that that is one of the most important things that I can offer you guys in general. If you didn't know that that's what was due, think about why not. Just consider it. Is it because I didn't say it out loud? No, that's not the answer. Is it because it wasn't written down? Also not the answer. Think about where you looked. Think about what your strategies were, right? Because there's a ton of input coming at us all the time. There's a ton of emails. I send long emails. I know that I do. If you have something like you want to say, hey, if there's a due date, can you send it as a single thing with no other content to it so I don't have to read through a huge thing? I'm happy to do things like that. If you have a system that's going to work for you, did you ask me? Did you ask a friend? If you asked a friend, did you confirm it? Did you check out the Canvas announcements to make sure that what your friend said was lining up with what I said? All of that type of stuff. Make sure that you are strategizing to protect yourself. Okay? I'm not going to grade you harshly on those elements, but there are absolutely people out there who will. And the only times I'm going to get cranky with you is if you're not ready for something that I specifically said is going to be a group activity. So, because we're depending on each other to be able to do this project, right? That's where the cranky comes from. We're depending on each other, and your classmates are depending on you. So if you didn't know that something was due, if you didn't know what it was, if you didn't know what it looked like, how do you find out? How do you find out? Strategize. Protect yourself, okay? Protect yourself. That wasn't at you. That was at my phone and the time. All right, next step. We're going to press this boy. We're going to press him. Okay, see that? If I was grading you, I'd be cranky about that. Good news. No one ever has to know. Andrew, if secretly you keep this waistband somehow, I forget to seam rip it, just remind me that it's my fault. I'll believe you. So what we're doing, we're making sure that all of our gunky stuff pointed upwards. Upwards towards the edge of the white. That's where he lives now forever. All of our seamy stuff that we don't love, up, up, up. Then we're folding him over. All right? All the way around, we're folding him over. The edge of your white, or well, in this case it's white, but the edge of your waistband wants to hit below the stitch line of your actual seam that attached your waistband. Okay? And that's all we're doing. I'm going to go all the way around and do that. Pressing it down so that what we end up with is this nice clean front. The nice clean, neat edge. And that's what we want to see. Okay. So just to make it clear, everything up until this point, I mean, I don't really care who presses it, to be honest. Like, live your best life. Up until this point, do we see why we don't love Sharpie as much as we should, or why it might be important to line up our lines better than I did in this particular case? Because I was like, I won't grade you on it. But will you grade yourself? Will you judge yourself? I would. So everything up until this point is the responsibility of the garment owner, not the alterations person, the garment owner. And again, I don't care who presses it. We are now, at this moment, marking it with the finger, we are now moving into what is the responsibility of the alterations person, which is to finish the waistband to the appropriate measurements of the person who is going to be wearing it, based on the fittings, the marks that were made during fittings, the measurements of that person, all right? So this and the hem, this waistband, finishing the waistband from here, everything after this point, the hem, either the 2 leg hems or the 1 big skirt hem, depending on what you're making, and any changes based on the fitting that need to be made in side seams. That is the responsibility of the person doing alterations. That's it, full stop. Don't cut anything. You only have to stitch. You don't have to trim anything or cut anything down. Let people handle their own crotch seams. That just seems to be the best comfort point for everyone. If you are in alterations and you're working on alterations, your responsibility is finishing the waistband from this point onward, making beautiful hems, which is a separate video labeled hems, and making any changes that are necessary in the side seams, inseam, outseam, or the side seams of the skirt, all right? That is the responsibility breakdown. It's 3 tasks that you must perform for your classmates. And now, there are a few ways to do this. Actually, there's a bazillion ways to do this, okay? For your edification and your education, there's 1,000 ways to do this. I'm going to give you one way to do this that I expect you to do. If you come up with some fantabulous alternative way, or you like follow YouTube video for the coolest waistband ever, cool, tell me about it. Tell me about it in your submission. Go for it. This is the way I expect you to do it, and this will be accepted if it's done well and graded well if it's done well. So we're folding the gunk under. We're folding him down. Right about on the same stitching line that's already there for us. We're matching that up as best we can, right about to that stitching line that's already there. So this is what we're looking at. You'll have a stitching line already. Fold him under on the line. Lay him out so that he's pretty much matching that stitching line. Give him another press. The pressing will help you. I promise you. Do not skip the pressing step. It's going to keep everything in place for you. I'm going to repeat that step all the way around. So now what we've got is a pretty decent line, even if I folded this back up because I pressed it. I'm still going to have that crease line on top of where the marker line already was, and it's going to fall back into place pretty neatly and cleanly. That's what we want to see. Now to pin. And go ahead and pin it exactly where it is. Perpendicular to this line, pin, pin, pin. And again, when we get to these points where there's a seam hanging out, he's going to try to, flop around and get in your way. Recommend doing a pin here and a pin here just to make sure he's behaving. Behave. So my actual preference now that I've pinned this, like if it was me and I was doing this on purpose, like for myself, I would actually do this by hand. I would do a tunnel stitch and just do this just because it comes out nicer, lays a little bit more perfectly, in my opinion. Actually, no, factually it does. But that is not the technique that we're going to use. There's no hand stitching. Guess what? We're using the straight stitch on the sewing machine. So your stuff wants to look pretty from the front. And I know I've pinned the back. You pin the back. Make sure that all of your pin heads are kind of like below, because you don't want to break your needles on them, below the white, below the waistband. And then go ahead and go from this side. You want it to look pretty from the front. So what we're going to do is called top stitching. We're going to use this line as our straight. And we're going to create a stitching line that is an even distance from there. I would recommend using a sewing machine guide for this. I genuinely don't think it's worth your time to mark it out, but if that helps you, feel free to. I'm not about to police that, because that would be a super weird use of my time. Oop. Hold, please. Hold, please. I missed a spot. Hold. How's everybody else's Wednesday? Did we have breakfast? I hope so. You better stay and behave. I should edit this part out. I'm going to be real honest with you. I will forget. I'm telling you right now. Feel free to skip ahead until you see visuals again. Go for it. Okay, coming back online. Okay. So at this point, this is what I've got. I want it to look pretty from this side. This is my front. This is my outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a guide, and you can do this any way that you want. I'm going to choose a guide on the sewing machine. So for example, do you see how I've placed the color transition, this really clear seam, in the middle of where my foot is marked? Because my needle is to the side on this particular machine, and look at your foot and look at your needle placement. Because this is how it's set up, that's going to put my actual stitches right about here. And that's exactly where I want them. All right? Send my needle down. Immediately break everything. The chaos. And so what I'm aiming for, I'm kind of inching my pin a little bit here. What I'm aiming for is this going down the center of the foot. Oh, he errored at me. What did I do to you? The machine's yelling at me. It knows. It knows. Oh, hush. Come on, baby lock. Baby lock. Oh, it's because I didn't put the foot down. That's where we're at, you guys. So I'm aiming, and I'm using the machine, pieces of the machine as a guide. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And we'll do a little bit. And then you'll notice, because there's more layers now, your pins are going to be a pain in the butt. In the buttocks. So as you go, feel free to alter them around. Take your time. Better to do it once well than several times poorly, usually. And I know my pin head's here. Boo, boo, boo. I'm going to nudge my pin out of my way a little bit. All right. So we're just creeping along. That's all we're doing. All right, so let's talk through this. Is this the single best way to do a waistband? Absolutely not. Is it the quick way that I would tell you to do it if we needed something like done, done, done right now for theater? Absolutely it is. This is how I would tell you to do it, which is why this is a skill that we're learning in case you ever end up in that situation. Good news, you'll be a waistband expert. We know that one side, the side that we can actually see, it's always easier to get a nice clean line. Your back's going to be a little raggedy. That's something that we accept in this case. All right? You don't have to correct the back to make it look perfect. You want the front to look nice. Did I give you a perfect A, person who might eventually end up working on this garment? Absolutely I didn't. Look how wonky that is. How dare I? Look at some of these little zigs and zags because I didn't remove the pin in time, so it made it kind of zag out of place. Look at these Sharpie lines that I could have moved the waistband down. Look at this weird little hole that ended up here. How did that happen? Who knows? It might have been aliens, all right? This is not a perfect A. It's not bad. Most likely you're in the B range, not for the total garment at this point, but for that section, the waistband section. Okay? Yeah, we'll see. But we're definitely not perfect. Use your common sense. Use your eyes. A lot of these things that don't look perfect, you can see them. Yeah? And good news, it a pant. That step that we just did is the responsibility of the alterer, not the garment maker. Yes? Now grab some elastic. If this spool runs out, you want the 1 inch thickness. If you're doing elastic, if you're doing drawstring, grab a drawstring. They are in the crafts lab with the shoelaces. You can probably find something to work with there, or a ribbon or something from trim, whatever you would like to do. There's yarn, there's string. I believe in your creativity, but this is the type of elastic that you want. He this thick. He's gonna live in here. Yay, we love him. We've made this thicker, wider than the elastic is, because I want it to make it as easy as possible for you to do this if this is the first time you've done it. If it's tighter, it's a little bit trickier to do. You're gonna cut your elastic the size of the waist as it's measured in the fitting, which might be a little tight to keep the garment tight. It might be a little bit loose if we wanted the garment loose. Might not be the actual written measurement of the person. You're going to cut that measurement minus 2 inches. That measurement minus 2 inches total to keep it up, all right? If this spool runs out, there's a ton of 1 inch elastics in black and white in Big Red, in the Big Red cabinet with the door open over there. There's a ton. Hello, Elmo. Okay, fancy technique. I've cut a piece. I did not measure this. Whoever is working on Andrew's pants is going to have to do that part themselves. Good news. Put a safety pin through one end. Yay. All the way over here, if you followed step by step, you're going to have 2 tubes. This is called a waistband, but it's also called an elastic casing. Okay? There's plenty of space in there for him to go all the way through and loop around and create an elastic waistband. The one thing I'm going to recommend is that you take a pin or a safety pin and you tag down the other end. Doesn't matter exactly where. You just want to make sure that as you're pulling the active end through, the passive end that you're just leaving kind of hanging out there. So I'm going to pin it like right here. And I'm going to set the phone down to do that, but keep talking. You want to make sure that your active end isn't pulling with so much pressure that it pulls the other end through and you have to do the whole thing again. All right, so that's why we pin it down. We're just tacking him down just somewhere out there so that he doesn't pull through when we don't want him to. And then we take the dive into the waistband. So we're using our fingers and we're feeling the safety pin and pushing it through this tunnel by feel, all right? There are a couple other ways to do this. This is the low-tech, every single costume shop in the history of ever has done this at some point in their lives. And again, I'm trying to do this, so I'm feeling it. I feel the head of the pin, and I'm pulling, and I'm pulling. Think about if you've ever had to replace a drawstring in your own pants or your hoodies, whatever drawstring items live in your life. Oh my God, I can't hold this phone. So I'm just pulling, and I'm pulling, and I'm pulling. I'll get to a certain point, and then I'll kind of like, it'll have grouped up, and I'll start tugging that down so that it evens out, and then I'll just keep going all the way around. It's the whole process. Here's something that happens in the waistband when you get to a seam. Moment of crisis. Oh no, it won't go further. Why won't the safety pin go further? Can we see the outline of the safety pin right there? It won't go. Why? Because you've got 2 layers. It's going in between the layers of the seam allowance that are in that seam. So you just kind of futz around. What was the phrase I used that is weirdly effective for everything costume related? See, slipped past. The grope and hope, right? You can't strategize this. You got to do it by feel until it pops through the actual space between the seams instead of getting into the space between this top layer of fabric and the seam allowance. You just got to kind of do it by feel and keep keep at it until you find the gap, basically. So we're all the way around this way so far, and as you can see, soon it's going to get all the way through and it's going to start pulling, which is why we're glad that we tacked it down with a pin to make sure it's not going to pull all the way through when I don't want it to. Leaving my phone down but continuing to talk, so please listen to this audio as I finish up this step that I don't have a way to show you, but I'm just taking through the rest of that elastic. If you're doing a drawstring, you might want to make your opening in the waistband towards the front or at the front center instead of to the side. That's between you and your aesthetic choices, all right? That is up to the garment maker. If you're an alterer, you're just altering the garment, check with the garment maker where they want that. Where do they want the drawstrings to emerge from? That is your mission. Whether or not you choose to accept it, it's too late. And we're almost there. But again, putting the elastic or the drawstring through, making sure that it's the appropriate size, and closing it off is the responsibility of the altering human. Okay, so look at this. You're going to have some wonky stuff, flat some places, gathered some places. Just going to go ahead and ease it out, move along until it's pretty even, which will happen naturally from wear. Now look at this. This is one of the reasons that sometimes we do up to double or even more in terms of width than we actually want the final waistline to be. This is what we mean by gathering fullness. So it's only a little bit gathered, it more looks lumpy. If it was more and more and more, it would look fully gathered like this everywhere, or even more so. So that's the aesthetic question. What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to look like? And then the elastic will stretch when it's actually worn typically, because this is fitted pretty well to the body, if I recall correctly, which means that it will smoothen out as it's being worn for the most part, but not everyone's will, all right? If you're doing a smooth waistband and you put gathering down here, you don't have to do this part, but you do have to help your alterations person understand your process since you did it differently from the rest of the group, and make sure that they feel comfortable doing those alterations. And of course, let me know if you need help with that. All right, so over here, we've popped out to the open side. We never attached these two. I'm not going to do it. Because this is somebody's actual project, right? I'm not going to do it and nail it down. What we want to do here with our straight stitch, I'm going to draw a rectangle and I'm going to stitch all the way around, turning corners. I might even make a couple X's through it. You want to make sure that these two pieces of elastic, once you're positive that they are where you want them to be and the size you want them to be, are stitched together for life. Never the twain shall part, all right? Doing a kind of rectangle and then an X through it, that's kind of like a standard way to be sure that you're doing it. You could go over and over several times. You could go like, I could go bam, 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 and then pop over here and go bam, 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 as long as it's really reinforced, all right? I'm not going to look inside your waistband to check how you attached your elastic, but you want it to be strong enough to bear the weight of being at the waist. Structure points, right? So once he's done, what are we doing with this dude? What are we doing with all of this extra? Fold him under. I'm going to press him down, and I can't do this because I'm not finishing off the elastic. I'm going to fold him under so those nasty edges go away. All right. I'm going to press it. And then you're at the very least going to connect it up here. You could do that with a hand stitch, you could do it with a machine stitch. It's okay if you leave it with a little hole here, a little gap and opening, in case you ever wanted to change it, in case you aren't satisfied with your results. That's an easy way to make alterations. We leave little gaps and things like this sometimes in theater, just in case the next person needs to do it a different size. So that is acceptable, but you want it at least closed at the top, all right? That's a place to use some common sense, how you're gonna make that happen. If you don't feel comfortable doing like a quick tack with your hand stitching, you can probably find somebody that will or can show you to. You can always make a request for me to show that specifically. I'm not going to do it right now, but let me know if that is something that you need. So fold under the grungy edges, press them so that they're more inclined to stay, so the fibers are oriented to stay, and then make sure that you tack the top closed so that it's only a gap. All right? These go away. Tack it up here. Good news, you're done. Good news, you're done. It's almost 7. Oh my God. All right, good news, you're done. I have never talked this much in my life. I regret everything, but this is what we're looking at. And again, I didn't give you a perfect A. Look at it yourself. Part of the skill that we're developing is learning to identify quality. Point out the places where you know it's less than perfect and what can you do to fix them. Do you want to fix them? Perfect A is going to be perfect or real heckin' close, okay? So look at it yourself. You can always send me a shot, like a photo of something, text me a photo of something and say, hey, for this part of the grade, what would I get for this? What percentage, if it's a 6% part of the grade or something, what would I get for this piece of it? And I can tell you 5 out of 6, or I can tell you 4 out of 6. I'm happy to do that anytime. And then you can make an educated choice about whether you do it again, whether you leave it, what you want to do. All right. I will do that literally anytime that I'm not asleep. That's the whole deal. If you're doing drawstrings, you're doing the same thing with some strings. That's the catch. If you're doing a flat waistband, we've talked about it a little bit, but feel free to reach out if you need further waistband help, especially making sure that your alterations person needs it. To recap, alterations person is responsible for the hem, for folding over and attaching the second step of the waistband, for sizing the elastic or the drawstring correctly and inserting it, and for any changes from the fitting made to the side seams. Everyone else is responsible for their own things. What you're responsible for in your own garment. Pockets. I'm going to just declare pockets unless you want to trade with someone. I don't know why you would, but sure. Your crotch seams. Getting to the point that we started this video at with the waistband installed by one seam and your seams sewed together ready for fitting. And your embellishment. Let's not forget. Let's make her pretty. I can neither confirm nor deny whether or not I'm still fully human. Always, if you have specific questions, I can't go through the whole thing again for you, but if you're looking at something, you want to know what your grade is going to be, you want to know if you did it right, you want to know what's the next thing, because you didn't understand it from the video, this is my face. I live here. Come find me. Just because I'm in New York doesn't mean I've abandoned you. And yeah, get at me with questions. Let me know what you need. I cannot help you unless you let me help you. Help me to help you. I would love to. And I will send you all pictures of ferrets. Yay, goodbye.